Welcome, everybody, to the 7 Minutes to Better Selling podcast. I am the host, and my name is Colin Lake, and I'm also the president and founder of Developing the Next Leaders. Developing the Next Leaders is a sales and coaching learning development organization, and we're here to talk with a wonderful friend and inspirational leader in so many ways. His name's Marty Ferguson, which we'll bring him on in a second. And so from a logistics perspective, although our title is 7 Minutes to Better Selling Podcast, the 7 Minutes to Better Selling Podcast, the live conversations last anywhere from about 7 to 12 minutes. And once we wrap up the conversation, we go back to the studio, we edit out the pearls of wisdom, and we pull this thing down to 7 minutes and put that out for all folks in all walks of life to learn something from. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce Marty Ferguson. So welcome, Marty.
Hi, Colin. Thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here as well. So Marty, before we turn it over to you for a question, the sales industry and maybe even more specifically, the financial services sales industry is under a good deal of pressure as of late. Like, it's harder to get people face to face, in this virtual or hybrid world that so many of us live. And so there's other folks who sometimes maybe lessen the value of salespeople. So we're here to talk about ways that sales folks can enhance their value or improve their value. So I had mentioned that you and I had done some work together personally and professionally and different things like that. And so I wondered if you would share a little bit more about like where you come from, who you are, and why people would want to learn something from Marty Ferguson.
Cool. Well, thanks again for having me, Colin. I'm really happy to be with you and your guests. My story is short, but I'll be brief. I started off as kind of a geek electrical engineer at WPI in Worcester, just 40 miles west of Boston. Then joined GE's training program and had various assignments around the country at GE's facilities. And then went back to business school, where you're from, in Philadelphia at Penn, and did my business school work at the Wharton School, and then joined Accenture. I had been a client of Accenture when I was at GE before I started school, and I really liked the culture and the type of people that were working there. So I joined the firm there and became what was for the rest of my career a consultant, a line consultant at Accenture. I was there for 25 years. I was a partner for 17, and my last assignment there was I ran our book of business for all of our life science clients, which are pharma, biopharma, medical products in the New England area. So I had a large book of business, or a fairly sized book of business, one that I was proud to have. And I finished there a few years ago. And then, as you mentioned in one of your intro notes, I've sort of turned the corner to giving back, going full circle back to WPI and teaching at their business school to help round out the really technical edges that those engineers have to get them ready for the business world.
It's great. One of the fun things is in this world of like technology sales, which is getting so popular, there's so many like engineers who are learning to or working to bridge the gap between like the technical component of the world and relaying that to the sales component of the world. And so that's fun to see. Do you spend much time on that, Marty, in your learnings at WPI?
That is the objective. These students, these undergraduate students, have all the tech skills that you would ever hope for them to have and the analytical thinking that goes with it, but they don't yet have the experience or the academia background to round off those edges and see how to apply that technology in a business world, which of course always includes sales and is led by sales. So that it is that exact objective that I'm trying to do with my kids at school. So I love doing it.
Yeah, it's great. Marty, let me ask you this. So you come from the world of like pure consulting or true consulting. And why I call it that is salespeople, in particular over the last 10 years, have tried to evolve into this idea of consultative selling. And so like my question to you, and see if you can maybe lead the conversation on how to help people understand like what consultative consulting work is and how that translates into consultative selling.
Yeah, I think the concept of consulting conjures the image of the consultant giving advice and new knowledge to their client, when it really in practice is almost the opposite, where the number one consultative selling skill that I ever had was listening. And as a result of listening, active listening, and getting to really understand what the client's problem was and what the environment around which that problem existed in their business place it was only then that I could ever craft a good consultative solution to them. So when people were saying nice things about me, and they didn't always, but when they were saying nice things about me, that they would say, you and your team are really listening to us. You're listening to my guys. They understand that you're on their side, and it feels that way. So it was my own consultative style was one that was based on generating trust from my clients, and they were long-term clients. I only had a few clients over all those 25 years because I grew to know them and know their business and know what made them tick, or tried to learn at least as best I could. And therefore craft all of my consultative solutions around their environment and making them successful. It was sort of one day after another of trying to do more for them than more for my own business, because that was what generated the next sale.
Let me ask you this. I would suggest, and maybe others would suggest as a generalization, salespeople aren't the best listeners.
Right.
In other words, are good talkers. Yeah. So how do you become a better listener, or how did you become a better listener specifically?
Well, the I want to talk before you're done speaking is a disease that consultants have in spades, and I just found that left the client less interested in what you were saying, and ready to move on to the next person or their own topic. And the more I listened deeply to what they were saying, the more they had to say to me, and the more I could learn exactly what was going on, not at the surface, but because I embedded myself in their company every day, came into their office and tried to make their lives a little better, picking up pieces that maybe they weren't doing, and generally advancing their cause at the maybe sometimes extent of my own, was the oil that made the sales engine, spin.
Man, I hope everyone picked up that very last sentence that Marty said. Like, even if it was at the expense of my business or my success or my ability to tell my story, I was willing to hang in and listen all the way through. Yeah, that was a great one, Marty. How do you, I'm going to use air quotes here, fake listen? Like, some people say, I don't have great listening skills. So like, how do I work on this? Like, how do I get to fake it till I make it type thing? Like, is there things you can do to train yourself to ultimately be a better listener? Like, we can't, if we're not a great listener, we can't all of a sudden say, okay, now we're going to do this. We're going to be a great listener. What are those early steps that get us to be a great one?
Well, if you struggle with that skill, I think you have to consciously put your agenda on the back burner. You have to go into the discussion saying, I know I'm trying to make a sale here, but what does the other person really want to get out of this discussion? And how can I enable that? Because the more times those discussions make a success for what that speaker, your client, wants, as opposed to what you want, the more times the trust starts generating and building and building and building. And there's no better salve to a sales effort than trust. I mean, that was, I think, my best club in my bag was the trust that got generated over day in and day out of trying to do right by them, and going to bat on their issues with their people, their peers, their bosses. Just adopting their agenda generated that trust, and that's what caused the success to occur and to build on each other. But you got to put your own, to get directly to your question, you have to try to consciously put your agenda on the table behind you and figure out what the agenda of the other person is and work on that.
Yeah, I love that vision, like that visual. Like take what I have in my mind, put it back there, and then we'll worry about that if we get this first thing done. Marty, I'm going to ask you for a single thought, a wrap up thought, if you will, and then we'll wrap up the call after that.
Well, I go back when I think about my sales efforts, it is about the trust. Because if you're coming to a conversation with a client that doesn't trust you, you're just not really going to make it work. You have to do the day-to-day work, put in the hours, put in the effort, pick up the pieces that they leave behind to day after day generate and build upon the trust of the prior success. And that will really make that engine spin.
That's another pearl. Like, like trust isn't built overnight. It isn't. It takes a lot of work to do that. And then that trust, those like bricks that start building that trust are listening skills, and Marty shared some of those. Okay. So Marty, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks so much for your sharing and for the drops of these little pearls of wisdom that'll help us all be a little bit better at serving our clients. So Developing the Next Leaders continues to stay focused on helping sales folks throughout the world get better at the things that allow them to solve the problems for their most important person in their lives, outside of their family, which is their client. So how we do that isn't always easy, but it all starts with, as Marty shared with us, listening more thoroughly and more often. Good selling, everyone.